me. I don't know about where you are in the world, but in Brooklyn here, there's been some really crazy wind. And so I get a little bit scatty when it's windy. So just check in before we begin to ground. It's just a little moment to go, how am I actually? Before I arrive into the breath and into where we're going to go, just acknowledging. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to change it, but just, how am I? So, for me, I'm feeling like a little bit scattered. So I'm taking that energy into my grounding and just, I wish something different for myself. And for you, you may feel really expansive and you don't necessarily wish something different. You just want to ground into that. So from where you are, just now allow yourself, if it's available to you, to just let your eyes relax away from the screen. And to just feel the difference when you just relax your eyes, when you go inside, when you let go of all of that outside stimulus, and you tune just to the sound of my voice. And in this moment, all that you need to do is breathe. Feeling now as the breath comes into the body, and bring it all the way down into your belly, not forcing it, but just encouraging it, inviting your breath down as far as it wants to go. And then feeling the relief and the release when that breath expires, when you let go. Now take in the biggest, deepest breath you've taken all day and hold it for a moment and fill yourself up with new energy. And then also just allow that to go. Now, as we begin now to take some conscious breaths in, I want you to choose a colour. Any colour will do. You may choose green or red or blue. And you're going to paint your breath with that colour. So that if you chose blue, you're going to see blue as you breathe in and see that blue go through your nose, down your throat, into your chest, down into your abdomen, expanding you. And then when you release and let go, is the breath still blue or has it changed colour? Become very interested in your breath. That is the only thing you need to focus on now. Each breath may maintain the same colour, or you may choose to change it, or your mind and your imagination may change it. Does a particular colour give you a particular feeling? Is blue calming for you? Feeling now the colour that you choose to breathe in and the colour that you choose to share. And knowing now that we are all in our own space, within our own breath in this moment, but we are all breathing together. And we are all together on this call, together in our Fearless community for this afternoon. So breathing in now your final breath for this grounding and hold it in. Give it some love, give some love to yourself. And then as you breathe out, you're breathing it out as a gift to everybody on this call with you, to bring us all together into the Fearless Circle for this next Fearless Chat. And when you're ready, when you've shifted your colour, You can open your eyes and just kind of smile at the screen. Like you might want to wink at somebody, see if they got your color. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go deeper with Jonathan and Eduardo. Enjoy.
Yeah. So we have this little gesture called elevated sparkulation. So we're going to elevate it, sparkulate. Deborah, thank you so much for that. Welcome to Fearless Chat 20. We are currently in a series that we're calling Mental Health, Mindfulness, and Spiritual Well-Being. We started this Fearless Chat journey 19 sessions ago when I was in Boulder, Colorado. Actually, Jonathan Hermida was one of the last people who I touched in San Francisco because he was also in San Francisco at the time that we were before. He was in San Francisco for a conference, and I was in San Francisco to run our Fearless Force program, and we had dinner together. We really wanted pizza. We were like walking through the streets of San Francisco to eat pizza because that's what the moment was calling for. After leaving Jonathan in San Francisco, I was in Boulder, Colorado, and then immediately chose to lean on the network that we have in Fearless Communicators and their expertise as an opportunity to build community around the topics of conversations that are most relevant and resonant in this moment. So Fearless Communicators is an inclusive, diverse public speaking coaching business. We work with thought leaders on what they say and how they say it. And we've been leaning on the expertise of our thought leaders, and Jonathan is actually one of our early Fearless Communicators private clients. Had the privilege of working with him on a keynote that he crafted that I'll let him go into greater detail around what it is that we crafted. And there are various other things that Jonathan and I both share. We are actually both from Miami, Florida. We share the same pedigree. We went to the same all-male Jesuit prep school. And we met serendipitously and through connection through another gentleman who's on this call, Chris Gates, who is now his business partner. And it's just been a journey to witness his growth and continued emergence as a real thought leader and expert in this world on mindfulness and mental health and well-being. He's someone who I love very dearly. I had the privilege of being the officiant at his wedding in October. So deep bonds. And I wanted to share that I came out in the email that I sent to everyone that I am somebody who has an aversion to meditation. And I feel really guilty about it. I feel like every time I try to meditate, I go to sleep, and I have a real shame about it. And we were kind of digging a little bit into this before. And I feel like that everyone who's like really successful and really accomplished and really crushing it is a great meditator. Like everyone has a really fabulous practice about it. And I don't. And I felt like before we jumped into something here with Jonathan, I wanted to honor that and come out with that, and acknowledging that the current landscape and where we're living right now may cause an opportunity to reflect on maybe the development of new tools. And I can think of no one better and more loving to have that conversation with than Jonathan Hermida. So Jonathan, welcome to Fearless Chat. I love, Jen Barkman, by the way, your puppies that have been making their appearance. We love your puppies. They're totally welcome in our space. So Jonathan, let's begin with getting a little grounded on who you are and what's been emerging for you.
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, it's such a gift to be in your space, Eduardo, and to be in this space with all of you. It's always beautiful to see a group of people from all over coming together to share in a space. And this space that we're talking about is such an important topic, the topic of mindfulness, the topic of our mental and emotional health. You know, and it's something that I've been more or less battling in a sense my whole life. And this is how I got on the journey. So about, like Eduardo said, I grew up in Miami, a heterosexual Cuban-American young man, was sold on ideas of what it means to be a young boy, what it means to be a young man. All of that mixed with a very toxic family environment where my two parents, beautiful, beautiful parents, but highly wounded parents, as I'm sure maybe you can understand and relate to, you know, not for their own doing and not by their fault, but they created a really toxic environment in my home environment. You know, there's something called emotional incest that is a really powerful term, but something that I experienced growing up where my parents were using me to meet their emotional needs. And so that entire mix of, again, being a heterosexual young man in Miami, having these experiences in my family household, it created a really toxic inner environment for me. And so I experienced a ton of anxiety, a ton of stress when I was growing up, but nobody would ever think that Jonathan Hermida was going through any of that, because I did a really, really good job of creating masks, of accumulating armor, to hang out with the cool kids and do all these things that made me seem quite normal, when in reality I was struggling. I was struggling inside. And so there was this moment where I had a breakup with one of my best friends, and that breakup shattered the masks, it shattered the armor, and it exposed me to the inner wounds that I hadn't faced, that I didn't know how to face as a 19, 20-year-old kid. You know, it was really confronting. It was really tough for me during that time. And so during that time, I went to see a therapist, and this is when I started to get really interested in the world of mindfulness, in the world of meditation and yoga. And again, being assaulted with all these things, it was really the tool that allowed me to begin slowing down. And I remember vividly in a therapy session with my therapist at the time, him taking me through a hypnosis session. And it was the first moment in my life that I saw that there was a space between me and my thoughts, that I was not my thoughts, that I was not my emotions. And again, at 20 years old, at that time, it was the most revolutionary idea imaginable. It really changed my entire life. And so that gap between me and my thoughts, that space, was something that I became completely enthralled with. And so I wasn't studying psychology or something. I probably would have if I would have caught this thing earlier on my journey, but I ended up finishing up my business degree, ended up getting a job at a sales job doing B2B, which was absolutely horrendous. It was the most, it was the most soul crushing work I could possibly do. Long story short, I ended up quitting that job after getting promoted. Somehow I was doing a good job, even though I spent most of my time sitting at a dock reading books and practicing meditation. I'm telling you, it was my entire life. That was what I was doing. And so I decided to quit that job, and I decided to go backpacking through South America. I was 23 years old. I left a girlfriend behind. I left my family, a career behind. And I really decided that I had to take my well-being, this journey of discovering who I am and what life is about, into my own hands. And so that's what I did. And I spent a year backpacking through South America. I did everything under the sun, plant medicines, learned under some incredible meditation teachers, yoga teachers, ended up getting the bite of the travel bug. And I knew that I needed to spend time abroad, continuing to learn, continuing to expand myself. And so I ended up living in South Korea for another 2 years. That's where I discovered the profession of coaching. And again, I was really naive to all of this. I was living in my own world. So when I discovered the profession of coaching back in 2013, I was blown away by the fact that coaching existed, that I could actually have a career helping people go through a similar journey that I've been going through, helping them to unravel their inner wounds, helping them to navigate their inner labyrinth, and so that became my sole focus, and I've been coaching ever since. I ended up moving to Berlin, living there for 2 years, started coaching executives and entrepreneurs, running workshops for companies like PayPal and Boston Consulting Group. Ended up running my first international retreats. And so it was really wild. Honestly, my journey was really wild, because it was sort of this flow that overtook my life the moment that I decided to say yes to myself, say yes to my inner journey. And within all of that, just the last piece of my journey, within all of that, I had planned to continue traveling the world and doing my thing. My mom gets diagnosed with cancer. And this is the piece that I enrolled, or I hired Eduardo to help me to create a speech around this, because it was such a pivotal point in my life where I thought that my life was heading in a certain direction. I had all these plans, all these goals, and then my mom calls me, tells me that she's diagnosed with cancer. I have to put all my plans to the side, and I become her primary caretaker for 1.5 years and witness her deteriorating by the month and by the year. And it was really difficult, really, really difficult. But I had, up until that point, tapped into something deep in life, realizing that there was a greater unfolding that was happening in life that was beyond me. And I was already knowing that I could trust that flow. And I was already in that. So I knew that there was something in my mom's sickness that was here to teach all of us. And so I was never closer to my mom than I was during her last year and a half of life. I met my now wife because I ended up moving back to Miami. And the last thing I expected to do was find my future wife in basically the place where all my wounds were acquired, And so that was really another pivotal point in my journey where I was like, oh, wow, like life, even though this is tragic, it's also life-giving at the same time. It was really this incredible experience on multiple fronts. And so here I am. My journey ended up taking me to start this company called RisOn that I'm so blessed to be running. This is an online gym for mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being, and we train and coach young professionals and entrepreneurs in the mental and emotional spaces. So this is what I'm here to share, and would love to dive you on, Eduardo.
So John, and if there's anything that's already emerging for people as questions, things that are top of mind around mindfulness or the development of some type of mindfulness practice, I invite you to use the chat as an opportunity to plug something in there. And then we can feed that in. And I know there's some very specific tools that Jonathan is committed to leave us with. And one of the things that I think is interesting, just because I'm also Cuban American and we share, the last place I ever thought I would be in a pandemic is Miami. Like I spent my entire life running away from Miami to end up in Miami during a pandemic. Is the cultural jump of being from where we come from, right, to find yourself at 18 at a therapist's office and then going on that journey. I can imagine that for other people on this call, a culture around mindfulness or meditation is not something that's common. Like my parents didn't practice mindfulness. My parents didn't talk about therapy. Like there were major traumas that we had in my grandfather took his life when I was in 8th grade. There was no therapist. There was no family counseling. There was nothing around that. And just looking at the diversity of the people who we have on the call, where do we start taking our initial steps in discovering, if it's not something that we have as a resource, right? Where are some places to begin looking to find what are ways that I can start either speaking or being in a practice around my mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And a quick anecdote, when I first discovered meditation, I was 19 or 20. I remember going to meditation back in 2007, 8, 9, around there, it wasn't a big thing. People weren't practicing this. So I remember going to this meditation class and not telling anybody about it. It was my little secret in this corner in Miami. And it felt nice. It felt nice because I was creating my own little world around it. But what I would say to mindfulness and meditation, and also tying it to what you were sharing earlier of your resistance to meditation, Eduardo, is that meditation does not have to be this formal sitting practice where you spend 30 minutes sitting in a perfect position and observing your breath and doing nothing but that. Meditation and mindfulness, to me, the true practice of it is being present for our life, being present for this moment. And so it doesn't have to be a formal sitting. It's very helpful if it is a formal sitting because our mind is so programmed to be active and to be sort of tilt toward the negative that formal practice does help to stabilize us a little bit. But in reality, the real practice, the real aim of the practice is to be fully present for our lives.
I love that. You're going to make me cry, Jonathan. First of all, I want to acknowledge that Bernadette just wrote, I think there's a hesitation to discuss mental health in Latinx and African American communities. It's a hard bias to overcome. Even when folks need to speak with professionals, they resist, which is totally true. And one of the things that I was reflecting on is, so I was raised Roman Catholic, and I think an early relationship that I had to meditation was prayer, right? So like there's like prayer, and then there's meditation. And meditation almost feels like the work of the devil. Like I remember there was like a family friend who was like, I said, oh, I was trying to practice yoga. She was like, you know what my yoga is? Getting on my knees and praying to God. And I was like, you can have both. Like it doesn't have to be like either or. And the thing about Catholicism for me is that it felt punitive, right? So like my reflection about praying as a kid is if I had to do the Our Father, Then I had to do the sign of the cross to open prayer, right? Then I did the Our Father, then the Hail Mary, then the Glory Be, then the act of contrition. Then I could have a conversation with God. And if I didn't do the sign of the cross at the end, it was null and void and it didn't count. Now, I don't know if anybody said that to me, but that was like my formative belief. So I feel like every time I sit down to meditate, I'm doing it wrong. I feel like I'm doing it wrong and there's no God or whatever, but like I'm being punished by everyone else who's doing meditating better than I am. And I think you're one of those people who's doing meditating better than I am, Jonathan.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's the beautiful thing about it. And that's the misnomer about meditation, is that the whole point of meditation is to witness your experience as it is.
Ooh, yes. Deborah, write that down. Yes. Brian says, you are not doing it wrong. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for saying me.
And that's the main thing, and that's also the most difficult part of meditation, to be able to hold our discomfort in the moment, to be able to hold our negative thinking in the moment and not jump into it, to be with difficult emotions and not get wrapped up in them. That's where meditation becomes a challenging practice if we're resisting. But in reality, if we're inviting, Rumi has a beautiful poem around this called The Guest House that I invite everybody here to read, and I'm sure many of you know it. But it's the essence of it is inviting all the emotions, all the thoughts that are coming into our experience into us as if they were our guests, because they're messengers. They're messengers communicating something really important to us. And so if we can be objective, if we can be open about what they're trying to communicate to us, then we can really allow them to move through us. We can listen to the wisdom that they're trying to share with us, because it's not a matter of like, oh shit, I'm feeling stress and anxiety and I need to get it away, so let me, meditate and breathe my way out of it. No, that's another way of coping and distracting ourselves, the same way that we would turn to booze or to drugs or to TV. And actually there was a point in my meditation practice where I was like, oh shit, I'm using meditation as a way to escape, actually, which is ironic, because meditation is a way to confront ourselves. But again, the human mind is so ingenious that it could use absolutely anything to escape what it doesn't want to experience. And so the invitation here is, little by little, for all of us on this call, to inch our way closer to allowing the entire experience that is us, because we are an experience. We're not a noun, we're a verb. We're a human becoming every moment, every day. And so if we can be with that experience and be curious about our experience, be curious about what's happening in this moment, about the moments where we contract or we close up, the moments where we open and we're lighter, noticing those moments so that we can become masters of our own life. And that's the thing that's really interesting, is for me, meditation is the journey to becoming a master of your own life, the same way that you would go into a degree, a college program to become a professional in a certain field. You're doing the same thing with yourself when you're sitting down to meditate. Because the moment you close your eyes, the moment you quiet down, you're going to be confronted with all the ways that you're trying to wiggle free and escape and not be in this moment. So
it's really interesting, because I feel like specifically now, I've really resisted it. It's like, because there's all this talk about the pause, and the slowing down and stopping. And it's like, I feel like I'm going more than I'm stopping, and it's like the stopping feels like a nice to have, and what I'm finding is that it's like work, and then it's Netflix binge.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the truth. And I can see where I'm resisting. And there's a part of me that feels like I'm not doing it right, which is why I'm resisting possibly the meditation. And I'm wondering, like, just in your expertise and your experience, and what I love when you framed, it's like the various ways, meditation is just witnessing our experience as it is. And there are many ways that we can witness our experience the way that it is, that may not look like what I have in my mind, which is an Our Father, 4 prayers, a conversation, and the sign of the cross, right? But it can look like many things. So what are some ways that you discover or find that people find ways to meditate that are productive or helpful?
Meditation is the formal practice. What I like about mindfulness is that it's a more inclusive term. And so we can put a bunch of other things under that. another useful avenue or approach when you're experiencing that moment of I can't stop, I'm go, go, go kind of thing, and I'm feeling the stress and anxiety of it, is pausing. You don't have to pause and sit for a formal practice, but pausing and asking yourself a question. What am I running towards, or what am I running away from? What don't I want to experience in this moment? And literally sitting with these questions, whatever questions naturally emerge that are curious for us. What's here that I'm trying to avoid, and why am I avoiding it? And what would happen if I were to sit with this for a moment? Or what if I call a friend or someone that can help me to unravel this a little bit? Because right now, me go, go, go is not really serving me, because I feel a whole lot of stress. I feel a whole lot of scarcity. And this is not a really conducive, creative energy right now. And so it's just recognizing that, for me, it's recognizing what's effective and what's not effective. Mm-hmm. And so there's moments actually where go, go, go works, but for short sprints. Right. And so just recognizing that if we're go, go, go for an extended period of time, there's something that we're going from, right? We're trying to run away from something. And so it's recognizing that and becoming so tender, so curious with our personal experience. Because if we can embody a curious and open mindset, that really allows us to move through whatever challenge we're facing much easier than we would otherwise. And what I would also say is note where you're experiencing negativity or resistance, because that's indicative of something that you're not wanting to experience. And that's where mindfulness, so whether it's sitting for a formal practice, whether it's journaling, whether it's going for a walk out in nature, anywhere, going to a park, that's really helpful. How many people here go for a run, go for a walk, and have an insight or a breakthrough, or it helps them to think about their day? Yeah, absolutely. That's another form of mindfulness. And as long as we go into it with the right intention, and not just because sometimes it's really helpful. Sometimes I run without music, and I just want my mind to go wherever it wants to go. And that's part of my practice, because I want to see where it wants to go, where it tries to land, where it solidifies, you know what I'm saying? And it becomes really interesting for me to see that, because it indicates a whole lot of things about myself that I find fascinating.
I'm curious. I want to share. Brian wrote, I read The Guest House to my father at his 70th birthday, and the 50 or so guests and my immediate family were like, what the fuck? I had to stand in the gift I was intending to deliver versus the heat of criticism. I love that, Brian. Thank you for the courage of doing that. John, there was something that you noted that I thought was really beautiful, which is like the stopping and asking the question, like in that moment of like, what am I running away? Like, what am I really running away from? What am I really avoiding? Yeah. And I'm curious, because there's the thing to stop and think. And then one of the things that the therapist that we had on Tuesday said is to sometimes speak to ourselves out loud.
Yeah, yeah. And
I'm wondering if the practice of like stopping and like, if I were to actually stop and say, okay, Eduardo, what am I actually running away from? Yeah. Like to actually hear myself say the words. Yeah. I wonder if that would have it settle in a different way than allowing it to just be a slew of thoughts. Because I feel like sometimes what happens is it's just a slew of thoughts. Yeah. And the behavior.
And that's why journaling and coaching or therapy or even speaking to a friend are so powerful, because those spaces help to put guardrails on your thinking and help to guide the thinking in a way that's more conducive than if we're just sitting there, asking ourselves the question and, having all sorts of thoughts come up. Right. And so those are all different avenues for that. And another question that, especially when it comes to the go, go, go mindset is, what am I afraid of right now? What am I scared of? And not being afraid of the answer, right? So these questions, we can ask ourselves that out loud. Yeah. And that's really powerful. I can ask myself that question inside of myself and sit with it. And sometimes what I like to do personally is it's almost like a meditation. So I close my eyes and I ask myself a question, but I don't necessarily seek the answer. I let the question sort of marinate a little bit inside of me. And in that marinating, eventually there's some answers that naturally organically start emerging. And those answers have a certain quality that the sort of go, go, go mind never has access to. Because, go ahead.
I just think that's what I would love is if people feel so compelled, not with this, not with any, not seeking for an answer, but just, I'm just really curious, like, what are the questions that people have now? Right? Like, what are the questions that are emerging for people? And we can use that in the chat. I'm just very curious, like, what are the top of mind questions that people may feel like they're running away from or they're avoiding? Like, what are the things that are like in people's minds in the moment? I just think it'd be very curious to kind of just hear. And I love that it's like not knowing, but sometimes it's okay to just sit with a question. Like, I don't need an answer. Not everything needs to be solved. But I'm just curious to see what that is. Deborah, were you asking me, can we try that? Yes.
And I also want to, as people are putting their questions into the chat, you know, Ali mentioned present moment can be very difficult to sit with. And yeah, you know, that's the thing that is absolutely incredible. We ask for our intimate partner or a friend to be with us in our most difficult moments. And sometimes it's difficult for ourselves to be with ourselves, for us to be with ourselves, you know? And so just recognizing that there are some really tender parts of ourselves, really difficult parts of ourselves that are difficult to hold space for. Again, emotions are really difficult to be with sometimes. And so compassion, I want to also emphasize the practice of self-compassion, you know, because, and this ties into what you were sharing about mindfulness and about your prayer practice before, Eduardo. And it's indicative of how many of us approach any of these practices and how we approach our own lives is we are so damn hard on ourselves, right? We give ourselves such a hard time. Like, oh, you see, you're not good enough. You can't sit and meditate for 10 minutes. You see you're not good enough. You have to, you know, ask for forgiveness and pray and do all these different things because you're such a sinner, right? Like this mentality that we grew up as Catholics adopting. And so the practice of self-compassion, of being kind to ourselves, of asking ourselves, what do I need right now? What would it look like to be kind to myself right now rather than being so hard, right? Those are other entry points as well that really take the bite out of the intensity of the experience that we may be experiencing.
So we have some things so Ali just said, I'm always trying to escape the present moment.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah.
And how much power, and I want to note that, how much power is there in acknowledging that?
Yeah.
Because the moment that we acknowledge it is the moment we can do something about it, is the moment that we're already onto our mind in that we already see, like, it's so hard for me to be in this moment. And now you're going to be hyper aware of each time you're in this incredible setting or you're around friends and you can't even be in that moment. And so what that starts to do is that starts to naturally adjust your behavior. It starts to bring you into the present moment because you're already vigilant about the ways that you're not in the present moment. So I just want to recognize that, you know, that one thought can turn into self-judgment, or it can be seen as a beautiful opportunity to come back to ourselves.
Mine was, when am I going to go home? That's the question. That's top of mind.
Yeah.
Jen Barkman, I love this. Who am I if I don't try so hard?
And that's another beautiful question to be, because our identities are so tied into our suffering sometimes, are tied into our hardships. We have coalesced around these ideas about ourselves, created these boxes that we need to live in. And what's difficult for us to do is to let go of those boxes, because it's when we let go of those ideas we have about ourselves, it's almost like a mini death that takes place, right? This idea of like, I am this person, and if I'm not this person, then who am I, right? That's a certain death that we're afraid of. But the more that we can be in the present moment and allow the discomfort of that question to be there without doing anything about it, but continuing to perhaps not try so hard little by little, we start to find new ground as we go. And we start to see that, oh, I just let go of that identity and I'm still here. Wow, okay, I'm in this new moment. And now I have a whole new experience of myself that I never had before.
John, you just gave a little Cuban shimmy over there. I saw the shoulders giving like a little bit like azúcar. Yes. Deborah just shared, when will I and we feel safe again? Pat wrote, being present to nothing and being present to discovering every moment rather than having it to be all mapped out, to-do lists. Yeah, and I just feel like there's so much, I mean, we are in an existential moment. I feel like there's so much of, you know, there's been so much of everything and so much of nothing, like at the same time. And I think it just leaves us also with time and space and breath to actually ponder, like, what really matters? Like, does any of this really matter? Why am I even doing this? Why do I wake up in the morning? I feel like there's just so much, you know, when will this be over? When will my life begin again? You know, that there's like so much. It reminds me also of my mother, because like, I don't even want to think about that. Yeah. I don't want to think about that. Eduardo, Eddie, I don't even think about that. When all she's doing is thinking about it, by acknowledging that she's not thinking about it. I know that, John, you had like a specific pathway or a tool for us, you know, to lean on within RisOn also, like as a tool. And I think we can kind of zoom in now on that as a framework, perhaps, or for people to start developing what emerges for them.
Yeah, sure. Out of curiosity, speaking to Deborah's question here, when will we feel safe again? Who here resonates with that question? Who feels like in some sort of way, whether economically, physically, mentally, they feel unsafe in some sort of way, right? That comes, fears come up, worries come up. And so this could be a good entry point to the RisOn framework that I'll share with you. Because what happens when we're saying, will I ever be safe again? The invitation here is to, and maybe we can do an experiential thing. We can all close our eyes.
Love that. Yes.
So we can do that. So inviting everybody to close their eyes. Taking a moment to reconnect to that breath that Deborah so beautifully guided us into. Taking a moment to feel ourselves in this moment. And just noting, what does it feel like to be me right now? What does it feel like to be me right now? And just notice where you're feeling certain sensations, certain feelings. Becoming aware of any areas that perhaps might be carrying some stress or tension. And with your breath, particularly on the exhale, seeing if you can soften that area. See if you can let go. And we're here coming into presence. And this is just to create a stable ground. And now I want to invite everybody to bring up a moment of disruption that you experienced recently. It could be a moment where you didn't feel safe, or where you felt stressed or anxious, where you were worried. Just a moment that triggered some uncomfortable emotions and feelings within you. And so the RisOn framework is as follows. So when you're feeling that in this moment, the R of RisOn is to recognize that I'm disrupted, recognize that I'm feeling uncomfortable, and that I want to flee this moment. And so recognizing, becoming aware is step number one. And in that moment where we're feeling triggered, and we recognize that we're feeling triggered, the next step, the I, is to take an inhale, very deep, intentional inhale through our nose, exhaling through our mouth, and really taking as many breaths as we need to come back to center. So first we recognize, then we inhale. And then the S is surrender, or we can say soften, whichever is a better entry point for you. And what we mean by that is to, wherever you're feeling the trigger or the emotion of the moment of disruption, seeing if we can soften that particular area as best we can, knowing that if it's a really intense situation, it's going to be more difficult for us. So just feeling into the access points here of softening, of surrendering our reaction to it. So we recognize, we inhale, we surrender or soften, and then we observe. We observe our mind, we observe our reaction. We sit here for as long as we need to see what it is that we're afraid of, what it is that we're frustrated or angry about. Observe the thoughts that are coming into your mind from this moment of disruption. Notice the sensations, the feelings that arise from it. And the invitation in this observation is to be as open and objective as you possibly can. Sort of like you're witnessing a 5D movie where it's completely experiential. You're noticing what's happening in this experience, in this body, but you're not identifying with it. Again, as best you can. Being gentle with yourself, being kind with yourself. And so in this moment of disruption, once you've recognized, once you've taken your inhale, once you've surrendered and then observed, you can then ask yourself, now what? And that's the end. Now what? How do I want to show up moving forward? Do I want to continue being triggered by this event? Or do I want to be more present? Or do I need to go take a walk? Or do I need to have a conversation with someone? So this now what gives us autonomy, gives us freedom to choose our response rather than being a reaction to our response. So this RisOn framework of recognize, inhale, surrender, observe, and then asking ourselves, now what, really can help you move through any challenge, any difficulty that emerges from day to day or from moment to moment. And so before coming back into this space, just taking one more moment to be with yourself, to acknowledge this time commitment that you've made for yourself today in this hour, and to softly and gently bow to yourself, acknowledging how well you're showing up for yourself. And then when you're ready, taking a nice, slow, deep inhale through your nose, and on the exhale, gently opening up your eyes and coming back into the space.
Thank you so much for that, Jonathan.
Welcome.
That was really beautiful. Yeah, elevated sparkulation, Jonathan. Clearly that's not your first rodeo, honey, leading that conversation. I'm curious for people as they're, coming back, what emerged for them in that exercise, if people feel compelled to, in the chat, kind of share what emerged for them. I had this moment, what emerged for me in the first moment was a moment when I had a client who said, I'm no longer able to work with you. So it was a private client. It was something that I was relying on, and the circumstances are such that it doesn't make any sense in this moment for us to be working together. And that brought this anxiety in the chest. And then what I loved was when you said, to show up for, it was something about showing up for yourself, being grateful that you showed up for yourself in the way you showed up for yourself today. It was something like that, but it was like a generosity of how I showed up for myself today that was so beautiful. And then I felt this thing kind of melt away. It was this as it kind of dissipated into the ether. That was really beautiful. So thank you so much for that, Jonathan.
You're so welcome. And that's the power of intentionally sitting or intentionally being in spaces like this. It really helps us to dissipate these sort of energies that coalesce within us, these sort of blockages that get created from these little moments of disruption that we have, they accumulate, and then we have this sort of ball in our chest or on our shoulders or in our stomach. And so by either sitting in a mindfulness practice or having, you know, a group like this to share with, it really helps to alleviate that. And also being kind to ourselves. It's so important to be kind to ourselves and compassionate with ourselves.
I'm curious if anyone feels compelled, you know, we're an intimate enough group to just take themselves, if they want to raise their hand and perhaps share what emerged for them in the exercise. Or Pat Kalfa. Yes.
Really amazing. I just got in touch with this. So about 4 days before my mom passed away, she passed away in November, I saw her. She was in Colombia, and I saw her. And when I saw her, I knew this was the end, the way she looked, the way she was acting. And so I had this experience of being totally helpless. There was nothing that I could do. And so it was just like the worst. And then she passed away 4 days later. And then, so I reached for groups like this and Team 2. So I'm doing this 1-year program. And so because I reached out and I was not going to take myself away and feel like, oh, the world is ending, I was able to pull myself out and then complete with her and create the completion with her such that even my family was involved. And out of that, I created an incredible relationship with my family in Colombia people that I don't even know. And now it's like one of the things I'm getting clear is there is no such thing as safety or there isn't. All there is like in any situation, can I be okay with just sharing how I'm feeling so I get out of my head? And so going through that and then now going through this, and I'm like, wow, this is like, it just keeps getting more challenging and more challenging. But yet at the same time, it's made me create amazing relationships, not having to be with them one-on-one, but like connecting with people that I haven't connected in such a long time. And with many, many people, I'm reaching more people now than I did when I had the ability to go visit them or to go see them. You know, now I can call anybody and they'll answer. Before it was like, I can't talk to you for another 2 months. Let me put you in the calendar. And it was like, okay, I'll wait 2 months. Now it's like, I'll call you. Yeah, how you doing? It's like, we're relating differently, even though we're apart. But I feel like I'm right with you, Eduardo and Sean, you know? So it's really, no matter what happens, being able to just deal with the moment and whatever's available, but not take myself away. So thank you, Eduardo, for your invitations to this. It's really incredible.
Thank you so much, Pat. Jonathan, anything you want to offer in Pat's beautiful sharing? Thank you, Pat, again for sharing. And thank you for witnessing and sharing with us your mother, who we share here now in the listening, and hold her spirit to the light.
Thank you. She was wonderful.
Yeah, 2 things to share. One is I absolutely feel you with the helplessness around a mother dying. That's exactly what I experienced, and I know the feeling, and it's the worst thing you can experience. You know, it's the worst kind of suffering. And the other thing is how suffering and struggle is such a beautiful gateway to transformation, because it's really the catalyst that helps us to go deeper, that helps us to ask deeper questions, that helps us to really define who we want to be and how we want to show up in the world. And so I'm hearing that in what you're sharing, and it's beautiful to hear the fruits of that from you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pat. We have time for one more person to share if they feel so compelled to offer a reflection or something that emerged for them. Jen, do you mind if I unmute you to share? You've got the dog.
Oh, yeah. Jen, that's a quote that I use often. Viktor Frankl's quote, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space lies our freedom to choose. That's, yeah, my work is based heavily on that space, on that gap. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I love that on my screen, I have Jen and Susan next to each other, and they're both clutching their dogs, which is like so beautiful that we we just welcome all the creatures, in this space. So Jonathan, how do people stay connected to you? I know that there are various options that you have for people to connect with you. Deborah put them on.
Yeah, so there's two things that Deborah shared there. One is actually a guided meditation that I'm sharing with all of you that you can utilize whenever you want. It's a brief 5-minute meditation that is really useful for reducing stress and anxiety. The other one is me and my co-founder, Chris, I don't know if he's still on the call, but we run spaces like this, free community sessions every Saturday. Actually, we started this since COVID-19, since the pandemic started, to create spaces where people can intentionally reflect and have spaces to unburden and process. And so you got a little taste of it with my meditation, but each session has a different flavor, has a different topic that we dive into. And each session gives you an opportunity to meditate in the group, to actually connect one-on-one with somebody in the call. We split people up into breakout rooms. We also come back together as a whole group, and there's also space to reflect in written or typed form. And so it's really a beautiful dynamic space to get deeper into yourself and to heal and to grow. And so I want to invite you, there's 2 sessions that are coming up. One is on overcoming stress and anxiety. That's on June 6th. They're all in the link. And the other one is on tapping into your inner wisdom so that you're making decisions from that place rather than from the place of fear and scarcity. And so all of that can be found in the link that Deborah shared on the right-hand side. And if, go ahead.
And Instagram.
And I was about to say that. And if you're on Instagram, follow us at RisOn Inc. I'll put that into the chat. Yeah, you could follow us there, and we're posting things on a weekly basis and would love to have you. We also have these online retreats that we're actually hosting one this upcoming weekend. There's another one happening next week. And so if you're looking for a space during, I know things are opening up a little bit more. If you're looking for a space to go deeper into your healing and into your growth, really recommend you joining the space. It's really powerful. Even though it's online, we've created such an intimate gathering. So I highly recommend anybody that's interested to check it out.
And the other thing that I'll share from my experience of Jonathan too, and it's something that you witness on this call, is that there's a true commitment to diversity and inclusivity in the spaces that we offer. And I would say the same thing about the spaces that you offer, Jonathan. Like that the space that you and Chris both hold as cisgender straight men, who are also Latinx, I find to be extremely inclusive, and really loving spaces for people to show up as they are. And it's really powerful and very important work to create spaces that are safe for everyone to show up as they are. So I really acknowledge you for your community.
I appreciate you sharing that. Our community represents 20 plus different countries, which is actually extraordinary. We're primarily composed of men and women of color, people of really diverse backgrounds. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful group. Really blessed to have them as our community.
Awesome. So now, and for those of you, if this is your first time on a Fearless Communicators call, thank you so much for being here with us. We will be sending out the replay of this call so that you can go back and listen to it. All of our Fearless chats are also on our Fearless Communicators YouTube channel. So they're all up there. The one that we have next Tuesday is a very different vibe from this one. Her name is Kate Ekman. And she has the full spirit workout. So it's like, how do we do cardio for our spirit? How do we do crunches for our spirit? How do we get into the exercise and give ourselves some spiritual fitness? She has a background as like a plus size model and a TV presenter on, on the Home Shopping Network. And I mean, she's a very different energy, and she is hysterical and really dynamic. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun on Tuesday. After that, we're going to have a wonderful session with another one of our co-facilitators from Australia. Her name is Johanna de Reuter, and it's all about activating our Zoom sessions. So sometimes our Zoom sessions and being on Zoom can be a little limiting. It's how we bring life and energy in the ways that we show up on Zoom. So that's going to be really fun. And then after that, we're moving into a whole new series on the emerging workplace and the emerging workforce. So that is what we're moving into in our next cohort of series. And then we'll be communicating with that over email. It is 6 o'clock. That completes our time here. And we have a final little ritual that we do here. So we get that at 6 o'clock. If you have to go, thank you so much. And if you're able to stay on for just a couple more moments, we do this little thing to kind of close ourselves out. So I'm just going to give a moment for people to, if they need to go. And then this is a very simple process. I'm not going to try to micromanage it. And what's helpful is to listen to who it is that we're communicating with. And we're going to acknowledge each person on the call. And then the person who goes last gets to acknowledge and thank everyone. Okay? So this is a beautiful opportunity to just be listening and being present. So Susan, Mary, I see you and thank you. And now you get to say that to somebody else.
Unmute.
John, I see you too.
Lori, I see you. Thank you.
Baki, I see you and I thank you. Oh, mute. Mute.
Thank you. Jen, I see you and I thank you too.
Eduardo, I see you and I thank you.
Delise, I see you and I thank you. Delise is in Rwanda and may not be hearing us. Ruby, I see you and I thank you.
Deborah, I see you and I thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. Ben, I see you and I thank you.
Allie, I see you and I thank you.
I can't see anybody. But I don't know who.
Henry.
Henry.
So,
but I see everybody and I thank you all. I love you.
And Henry.
I may be the last one.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everyone. I'm glad that you're present and with me. And I hope that you have a wonderful evening with whomever you love.
Hey, thank you so much. Henry's my godfather, by the way. # no big deal. And I shared about this today, and just Henry, because you're on the call, I just want to acknowledge that, you know, as a gay man, we had the passing of a real light, which is Larry Kramer, and someone who, as a gay man, I think we owe, you know, his anger and his rage and his truth telling, and his like unwillingness to compromise that over decades, I think is a huge force as to why we are where we are today. And I just think as queer people, it's an opportunity. And my uncle, my godfather, was someone who was in the early stages of those fights, you know, in the early 80s, you know, in New York City. And I think just as queer people, it's a moment to honor a real light and a real hero, and a true fearless communicator. So just honoring him and his light, may it continue to shine, and may she rage on and be angry in the various ways that she is raging on and being angry forevermore. Thank you all so much for being here. Jonathan, we're going to ask you to stay for just one quick second at the end as we wrap up. And everyone else, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week. Mwah. Bye. Ben, stay on 2 for a second. Bye, Delise.